My husband's family humiliated me at their Christmas dinner because I was just a waitress. 10 years later, they're begging me to save their family business. My name is Emma, and if anyone had told me 10 years ago that I'd be sitting in my corner office overlooking Manhattan while my in-laws literally begged me to save them from bankruptcy, I would have laughed in their face. But life has a funny way of turning tables, doesn't it? Let me take you back to Christmas 2014. I was 23, working double shifts at this upscale steakhouse downtown, trying to save every penny for nursing school. The tips were good, but the hours were brutal. I'd been dating Marcus for 8 months at that point, and this was going to be my first Christmas with his family. I was nervous as hell, but Marcus kept reassuring me that his family would love me. They're a little traditional, he'd said, adjusting his tie in the mirror, but once they get to know you, they'll see how amazing you are. Traditional. That should have been my first red flag. Marcus came from money. Real money. His dad owned 3 car dealerships across the state, and his mom had never worked a day in her life. They lived in this massive colonial house in the suburbs, the kind with a circular driveway and actual pillars. When we pulled up, I felt my stomach drop. I was wearing my nicest dress, a simple black one I'd bought on clearance, and carrying a homemade apple pie because I couldn't afford anything fancy from the bakery. The first sign of trouble was when Marcus's mom, Patricia, opened the door. She looked me up and down like I was something someone had tracked in on their shoe. Her smile was so fake it could have been painted on. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "You must be the server." Not waitress, not even girlfriend, server. Like I was part of the help. "Actually, I'm Emma," I said, extending my hand with the pie. "Marcus's girlfriend. I brought dessert." She took the pie like it might contaminate her perfectly manicured hands. How thoughtful. Store-bought. "No ma'am, homemade, my grandmother's recipe." Her eyebrows raised slightly like she was surprised I knew how to bake. "Well, we already have dessert catered, but I'm sure we can find somewhere to put this." Marcus squeezed my hand and whispered, "She's just protective. Give her time." The living room was like something out of a magazine. Everything was white and gold and looked like it cost more than my car. Marcus's dad, Robert, was holding court by the fireplace with Marcus's older brother James and his wife Ashley. They were discussing stock portfolios and vacation homes while sipping champagne that probably cost more than my rent. "Everyone," Marcus announced, "I'd like you to meet Emma." The conversation stopped dead. You could have heard a pin drop. Robert looked me over with the same expression his wife had used. "Ah, yes, the waitress." "Nice to meet you, sir," I said, extending my hand. He shook it limply, like he was doing me a favor. "Marcus tells us you work in food service." The way he said it made it sound like I was handling garbage. "I'm a server at Meridian Steakhouse downtown. It's actually a really nice place." "I'm sure it is," Ashley chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. "How quaint. Do you get to keep all your tips?" I felt my cheeks burn. "Yes, I do. The money's actually pretty good, and it's helping me save for nursing school." "Nursing school?" Patricia repeated like I'd said clown college. How ambitious. The dinner was torture. They seated me at the far end of their enormous dining table, as far from the family as possible. The conversation flowed around me like I wasn't even there. They talked about their country club, their investments, their kids' private schools. When they did acknowledge me, it was to ask me to pass something or to make some snide comment about working class values. The worst part came during dessert. Patricia had brought out this elaborate tiramisu from some fancy bakery, completely ignoring my pie. Everyone was raving about how delicious it was when James's 6-year-old daughter, Sophie, piped up. "Grandma, can I try the other dessert? The one the lady brought?" Patricia's face went cold. "Oh, sweetie, that's not really for us. That's just something the help brought." The help, in front of a 6-year-old, in front of Marcus, in front of everyone. Marcus opened his mouth to say something, but his father cut him off. "Patricia's right, sweetheart. Stick with the good dessert." I felt like I'd been slapped. My grandmother's apple pie recipe, the one that had won blue ribbons at the county fair, dismissed like garbage. I looked at Marcus, waiting for him to defend me, to say something, anything, but he just sat there, staring at his plate. That's when Patricia really went for the throat. "You know, Emma," she said, dabbing her mouth with a cloth napkin that probably cost more than my dress, "I hope you understand that our family has certain standards. Marcus is going to inherit significant responsibilities someday. He needs someone who can navigate our world, represent our family name properly." "Mom," Marcus finally spoke up but weakly. "No, it's fine," Patricia continued. "I'm sure you're a lovely girl, very hardworking, but let's be realistic. Marcus needs someone from his background, someone who understands what it means to be part of a family like ours." The room was dead silent. Everyone was staring at me, waiting to see what I'd do. I stood up slowly, my hands shaking with rage and humiliation. "You're absolutely right, Mrs. Davidson. Marcus does deserve someone who understands family values, someone who knows what loyalty means, someone who would stand up for the people they love instead of sitting there like a coward while their family destroys them." I looked directly at Marcus, who was still staring at his plate like a child being scolded. "Thank you for dinner, and for showing me exactly who I was dating." I walked out of that house with my head held high, even though I was crying by the time I reached my car. Marcus followed me out, calling my name, but I didn't stop. I drove straight home, called in sick to work the next day, and spent Christmas alone in my tiny studio apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching Netflix. Marcus tried calling for weeks. He'd leave these pathetic voicemails about how sorry he was, how his family would come around, how he loved me, and we could work through this. But I'd seen his true colors that night. When push came to shove, when I needed him most, he'd chosen them over me. I deleted his number and blocked him on everything. The humiliation fueled something in me, though. I threw myself into work with a vengeance, picking up every every extra shift I could. I started taking online classes to get my prerequisites done faster. I studied during my breaks, did homework after my shifts, and saved every single penny I could. My coworkers thought I'd lost my mind. You're working yourself to death, my friend Jessica would say. When's the last time you had fun? But I wasn't interested in fun. I was interested in proving every single one of those people wrong. I got into nursing school 18 months later on a partial scholarship. The rest I paid for with my savings and student loans. I graduated summa cum laude and landed a job at Presbyterian Hospital in the cardiac ICU. The work was intense, demanding, but I loved it. I was good at it, really good. After 2 years on the floor, I moved into cardiac surgery nursing. After 3 more years, I was head nurse of the cardiac surgery unit. The surgeons respected me, trusted my judgment, relied on my expertise. I was making good money, had my own apartment, a decent car, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of who I was. But I wasn't done climbing. I went back to school for my nurse practitioner degree while working full-time. It nearly killed me, but I did it. Then I specialized in cardiac surgery. By the time I was 30, I was one of the most sought-after cardiac nurse practitioners in the city. Surgeons were requesting me for their cases. Patients were asking for me specifically. And then Dr. Harrison made me an offer that changed everything. Dr. Harrison was the chief of cardiac surgery, this legendary surgeon who'd pioneered several groundbreaking procedures. He was also a savvy businessman who was tired of watching hospitals pocket most of the profits from his innovations. "Emma," he said one day after a particularly complex surgery we'd done together, "I'm starting my own practice. Cardiac surgery center, state-of-the-art facility, the works. I need someone I trust to help me run it. Someone who understands both the medical side and the business side. Interested?" I was more than interested. I was hungry. We opened Davidson Cardiac Center 6 months later. Yes, I named it Davidson out of pure spite. Dr. Harrison handled the surgeries. I handled everything else. Patient care coordination, staff management, insurance negotiations, facility operations. We were a perfect team. The practice exploded. Within 2 years, we had a waiting list 6 months long. We expanded to a second location, then a third. Dr. Harrison brought in 2 more cardiac surgeons. We opened an emergency cardiac unit. We started doing procedures that other hospitals couldn't handle. By year 5, I wasn't just a nurse practitioner anymore. I was part owner of a multi-million-dollar medical practice. I had a stake in 3 surgical centers, a house in the hills, and more money than I'd ever dreamed of. And then, last month, I got a call that changed everything. "Emma, it's Marcus." I hadn't heard his voice in 10 years, but I recognized it immediately. My first instinct was to hang up, but something stopped me. "How did you get this number?" Look, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, but it's about my family. We need help, desperate help." I could hear the panic in his voice, the same tremor I'd heard in his voice that night he'd called me after Christmas dinner, begging me to forgive his family's behavior. "Emma, my dad's business is failing. All 3 dealerships. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. My mom, she's not handling it well. And I know this is crazy to ask, but I heard about your success, about your business, and I thought, maybe..." I let him stumble through his pathetic pitch. The car business had been hit hard by the pandemic and the chip shortage. They'd made some bad investments, overextended themselves, and now the banks were calling in their loans. They were facing bankruptcy and losing the family home. "Why are you calling me, Marcus?" I asked when he finally stopped talking. Because we need an investor, someone with capital, someone who believes in family businesses." I almost laughed out loud. Family businesses? This from the people who'd treated me like hired help? "How much?" $5 million. I know it's a lot, but I'll think about it. I hung up before he could respond. $5 million. To these people, it was everything. To me, it was a rounding error. I spent the next week doing my research. The Davidson family, the irony wasn't lost on me, was indeed in deep trouble. Robert's dealerships were hemorrhaging money. They'd mortgaged the house to try to keep the businesses afloat. Patricia had already had to let go of their housekeeper and gardener. James had moved back in with his parents after his own business failed. They were desperate, completely, utterly desperate, and for the first time in 10 years, I was going to see them again. I called Marcus back and agreed to meet with the family to discuss their investment opportunity. I didn't tell him I was coming to gloat. I didn't tell him I was coming to watch them squirm. I just told him I'd be there Sunday at 2 p.m. for dinner. "Really?" His voice cracked with relief. "Emma, thank you. This means everything. My family is going to be so grateful." "Grateful, we'd see about that." I spent Saturday getting ready for Sunday's dinner. I bought a new outfit, a designer dress that cost more than Marcus made in a month at whatever job he was working now. I got my hair and nails done. I had my car detailed until it sparkled. Sunday afternoon, I pulled into that same circular driveway in my brand new BMW. But this time, I wasn't the nervous girl carrying a homemade pie. This time, I was Emma Davidson, successful businesswoman, here to discuss a potential investment. The house looked different, smaller somehow, shabbier. The paint was peeling around the windows, and the landscaping that had once been pristine was now overgrown and neglected. Marcus answered the door, and I barely recognized him. He'd lost most of his hair and gained about 50 pounds. He was wearing a polo shirt that had seen better days and khakis with a stain on them. "Emma," he breathed, looking me up and down. Wow, you look incredible." "Thank you." I didn't return the compliment. He led me into the same living room where I'd been humiliated 10 years ago. The white furniture was now yellowed and worn. Several pieces were missing, probably sold to pay bills. The family was all there waiting for me. Robert, Patricia, James, James, and Ashley, but they look like shadows of their former selves. Robert had aged 20 years in the past decade. His once commanding presence was gone, replaced by the desperate look of a man who'd lost everything. Patricia was trying to maintain her facade, but I could see the cracks. Her designer clothes were outdated, her jewelry looked fake, and her smile was strained. James looked the worst of all. He'd always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. Now he looked like a broken man, hollow-eyed and defeated. Emma! Patricia stood up with forced enthusiasm. Look at you. You look so successful. The same condescending tone, but now it was wrapped in desperation. Thank you, Mrs. Davidson. You look, well, we all knew it was a lie. They offered me wine, cheap wine I noticed, and we made awkward small talk for a few minutes. Then Robert cleared his throat. Emma, we can't tell you how grateful we are that you're considering helping us. I know we didn't. That is, I hope you know we've always respected your work ethic. Work ethic, not me as a person. My work ethic. Of course, I smiled sweetly. I've always believed in the value of hard work. The conversation continued with them painting themselves as victims of circumstance, people who'd just had some bad luck. They never once acknowledged what they'd done to me, never once apologized for how they'd treated me. Finally, I set down my wine glass and smiled. Well, this has been lovely, but let's talk business. You need $5 million to save the dealerships and keep the house. Is that correct? Yes, Robert said eagerly. We've run the numbers, and that would be enough to pay off the immediate debts and give us working capital to— I'm not interested in the dealerships, I interrupted. The room went silent. I'm not interested in cars or sales or any of that, but I am interested in real estate. Patricia leaned forward. Real estate? This house sits on what, 12 acres? Prime real estate, excellent location, close to the city but private. I'm thinking it would make an excellent location for a medical facility. I let that sink in for a moment. I'm prepared to offer you $7 million for the house and property. Their faces lit up. $7 million was more than they'd asked for. However, I continued, there are conditions. Of course, Robert said quickly. Whatever you need. First, you'll have 60 days to vacate the premises. I'll need to begin construction immediately. 60 days? Patricia's voice was small. Second, I'll need all of you to sign a non-disclosure agreement about this transaction. I prefer to keep my business dealings private. They were nodding eagerly. And third, I smiled my sweetest smile. I'll need you to sign over the rights to the Davidson name for any business purposes in this state. The Davidson name? James spoke for the first time. Yes. You see, I'm planning to name my new facility the Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center. It has a nice ring to it, don't you think? The color drained from their faces as they realized what I was saying. You want to name your business after our family name? Patricia whispered. Oh no, I laughed softly. I wouldn't name it after your family. You see, my legal name is Emma Davidson now. I had it changed 5 years ago when I started my practice. I thought it sounded more professional than my maiden name. The silence was deafening. I've already filed the paperwork to register Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center as a trademark, but I'm willing to let you keep using Davidson for personal use, of course. I'm not completely heartless. Marcus was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. Emma, you changed your name to Davidson? I did. Turns out it's quite a successful name in the medical field. My patients love the sound of it. Very trustworthy. Very established. Patricia's hands were shaking as she reached for her wine glass. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Do what? Build a successful business? Help cardiac patients? Create jobs in the community? I tilted my head innocently. I thought you'd be proud. After all, you always said the Davidson name represented certain standards. Robert cleared his throat. The offer. The $7 million. Oh, that's very real. I have the contracts in my car. My lawyers drew them up yesterday. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. In fact, let me call my assistant and have her bring them in. Wait, Ashley spoke up for the first time. You said you heard about Marcus's family's troubles. How? I smiled. Word travels fast in business circles, especially when prominent families are facing bankruptcy. It's been quite the topic of conversation at the country club. Their faces went white. The same country club where they'd probably bragged about their wealth for decades was now gossiping about their downfall. The club knows? Patricia whispered. Oh, honey, everyone knows. The Hendersons, the Blackwells, the Montgomerys, they've all been very concerned about your situation. In fact, Margaret Henderson was the one who suggested I might be interested in the property. She said, and I quote, "That Davidson place would be perfect for one of your medical centers, Emma." I let that sink in. Margaret Henderson was the unofficial queen of their social circle. If she was openly discussing their financial problems, they were finished socially as well as financially. Of course, I continued, I've assured everyone that the Davidson family will land on their feet. People like you always do, right? You're resourceful, hardworking, you understand the value of pulling yourselves up by your bootstraps. Marcus was looking at me with something between admiration and horror. Emma, I had no idea you'd become so successful. Oh, this is just the beginning. We're opening 2 more cardiac centers next year, one in Philadelphia and one in Boston. I'm also launching a medical device company. We've developed a new type of heart valve that's showing incredible results in trials. The patents alone are worth $50 million. James leaned forward. Patents? Turns out all those years of working closely with cardiac surgeons taught me quite a bit about innovation. Who knew that a server could understand complex medical technology? The barb hit its mark. James flinched. But enough about me, I said brightly. Let's talk about your future. $7 million is more than enough to pay off your debts and give you a fresh start. You could move anywhere, do anything. Think of it as an opportunity for reinvention. Move anywhere? Patricia's voice was hollow. Well, yes. The sale includes immediate immediate possession of the property, but I'm sure you'll find somewhere lovely to settle down. Maybe a nice little apartment in the city, something cozy and affordable. Robert was reading the implications correctly. We'd have to leave our home, the home where we raised our children. Your children are adults now, I pointed out. And besides, it's just a house. I thought people like you understood that family wasn't about material possessions. Isn't that what you told me? That I needed to understand what really matters? The room was so quiet you could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. Marcus finally spoke up. Emma, I know we hurt you. I know my family. I know I didn't stand up for you that night. I've regretted it every day for 10 years. Have you? I asked. Every day? Because you seem to get over it pretty quickly. I heard you married Ashley's sister 6 months after we broke up. What was her name? Brittany, the pharmaceutical heiress? Ashley shifted uncomfortably. They divorced 3 years ago. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. What happened? Let me guess. She wasn't from the right background either? Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch. It wasn't like that. No? Then what was it like? Did her family treat you the way yours treated me? Did they make you feel small and worthless and not good enough? Emma, please. Please what? Please forget? Please forgive? Please pretend that night never happened? I stood up and smoothed my dress. Let me tell you something, Marcus. That night was the best thing that ever happened to me. Your family's cruelty gave me the motivation I needed to become everything they said I could never be. I walked over to the mantelpiece where their family photos were displayed. Most of them showed happier times. Vacations, graduations, celebrations. All the photos seemed to stop about 5 years ago. You know what's funny? I said, picking up a photo of the family at some charity gala. I used to look at pictures like this and feel jealous. All of you so perfect, so wealthy, so successful. But now I see what I couldn't see then. What's that? Patricia asked quietly. You were never happy. Not really. Look at your faces in these photos. Really look. You're all performing happiness, not living it. You built your entire identity around having more than other people, being better than other people, but you never built anything real. I set the photo down and turned back to them. I built something real. I save lives every day. I've performed in over 2,000 cardiac surgeries. I've helped develop technology that will save thousands more lives. I've created jobs for hundreds of people. I've built something that matters. The silence stretched on until James finally spoke. What do you want from us, Emma? Want from you? I laughed softly. I don't want anything from you. I have everything I need, but I am curious about one thing. What? Do you remember what you served for dessert that night? The fancy tiramisu from that expensive bakery? They exchanged confused glances. No? Well, I remember. It was dry, tasteless, overpriced. You threw away my grandmother's apple pie, a recipe that had been in my family for 4 generations, for something that looked impressive but had no substance. I picked up my purse and car keys. That tiramisu was a perfect metaphor for your family. All appearance, no substance. Emma, wait. Marcus jumped up. The deal is still on the table. $7 million for the house and property. The contracts are in my car. But Marcus? Yeah? I need an answer today. I have 3 other properties I'm considering, and frankly, they don't come with the emotional baggage this one does. So think carefully about whether you want to sell to me, or whether you'd prefer to wait for the bank to foreclose in 60 days. I walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and one more thing. My grandmother's apple pie recipe. It's been featured in Food and Wine magazine 3 times. Turns out a lot of people appreciate authentic quality over expensive imitations. I left them sitting there in their faded glory, probably wondering how the hell a mere waitress had ended up holding their entire future in her hands. The drive back to the city gave me time to think. Part of me felt satisfied, vindicated even. I'd proven every one of their assumptions wrong. I'd succeeded beyond their wildest dreams while they'd fallen apart. But another part of me felt empty. The revenge I'd fantasized about for 10 years hadn't brought me the satisfaction I'd expected. Looking at their broken faces, their desperate circumstances, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt sad. Sad for the people they could have been if they hadn't been so consumed with status and appearances. Sad for Marcus, who'd been too weak to stand up to his family and had lost any chance at real love because of it. Sad for the time I'd wasted hating them instead of just focusing on building my own life. When I got home to my penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on my balcony looking out at the city lights. My phone had been buzzing with messages from Marcus, but I hadn't looked at them yet. Finally, I checked my voicemail. Emma, it's Marcus. I talked to my family after you left. We want to accept your offer. All of it. The $7 million, the 60-day move out, everything. But I have one request. Could we meet somewhere private? Just you and me? There are things I need to say to you. Things I should have said 10 years ago. I deleted the message without saving it. My assistant called the next morning to confirm the meeting with the Davidson family lawyers. The contracts would be signed Wednesday at 2 p.m. at my attorney's office. Tuesday evening, my doorman called up to my apartment. Ms. Davidson, there's a gentleman here to see you. Says his name is Marcus Davidson. Should I send him up? I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. Send him up. Marcus looked even worse than he had on Sunday. He was carrying a manila envelope and seemed nervous, fidgeting with his jacket. Thank you for seeing me, he said when I opened the door. You have 5 minutes. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve even this much of your time, but I need you to know some things before tomorrow. I didn't invite him to sit down, so we stood there in my foyer. First, I'm sorry, not just for that night, but for everything. For being a coward, for not standing up to my family, for letting them treat you like that. I've regretted it every single day. You said that already. Second, I want you to know what happened after you left. Despite myself, I was curious. I went back inside and told my family exactly exactly what I thought of them. I told them they'd just driven away the best thing that had ever happened to me. I told them their snobbishness and cruelty had cost me the woman I loved. And my father said I could choose you or them, but not both. So I chose them. His voice broke. I chose them, and it was the biggest mistake of my life. I felt something twist in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Third, my marriage to Brittany was a disaster from day one. Her family treated me exactly the way mine treated you. I finally understood what you'd gone through, but by then it was too late. You'd moved on, built your life, become this incredible success. He held out the manila envelope. What's that? My inheritance. The one thing my parents couldn't touch when everything fell apart. A trust fund my grandfather set up. It's not much compared to what you've built, but it's mine, free and clear. Why are you showing me this? Because I'm giving it to you. All of it. It's $300,000. I stared at him. Marcus, what are you talking about? I know it doesn't fix anything. I know it doesn't change what we did to you, but it's all I have to give, and I want you to have it. I don't want your money. Then donate it. Use it for one of your medical programs. Do something good with it. But please let me do this one decent thing. Let me prove that somewhere inside me is still the man who fell in love with a waitress who baked the best apple pie he'd ever tasted. I looked at this broken man standing in my foyer, offering me everything he had left, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the boy I'd once loved. Keep your money, Marcus. You're going to need it. Emma, but I will accept your apology. Not because you deserve forgiveness, but because carrying anger around is exhausting, and I'm tired of giving your family space in my head. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Can I ask you something? I said. Anything. Do you ever think about who we could have been if that night had gone differently? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Every day. We could have been happy, Emma. Really happy. Not the fake happiness my family performed, but real happiness. The kind that comes from building something together. Yeah, I said softly. We could have been. After he left, I stood in my empty apartment thinking about parallel universes and roads not taken. In another life, maybe Marcus and I had gotten married in a simple ceremony. Maybe we'd bought a modest house and filled it with children and laughter. Maybe I'd become a nurse at the local hospital while he took over one of his father's dealerships, and we'd built a quiet, ordinary life together. But this wasn't that life. In this life, I was Emma Davidson, cardiac surgery pioneer and medical entrepreneur. In this life, I was saving lives and building empires. In this life, I was successful beyond my wildest dreams. And if I was being honest with myself, I wouldn't trade this life for any other. Wednesday arrived, and the contracts were signed without drama. The Davidson family would receive their $7 million and would vacate the property by the end of the month. I would begin construction on the Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center in January. As I watched Robert Davidson sign away his family's legacy, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of triumph, just a quiet sense of closure. After the lawyers finished their business, Patricia approached me. Emma, she said quietly, I need you to know something. What's that? I tasted your pie that night. After everyone went to bed, I went to the kitchen and tried a piece. She paused, her voice shaking slightly. It was the best apple pie I'd ever had. She walked away before I could respond. 2 weeks later, I was in my office reviewing architectural plans for the new rehabilitation center when my assistant buzzed me. Ms. Davidson, there's a delivery for you. A courier brought in a small box with no return address. Inside was a mason jar filled with homemade apple pie filling and a note written in shaky handwriting. Dear Emma, I found this recipe in my mother's things after she passed last year. She always said it was the best she'd ever tasted. I thought you might like to have it back. Thank you for everything. Sophie Davidson, James's daughter. I sat there holding my grandmother's recipe, the one I'd thought was lost forever, and for the first time in 10 years I cried. Not for what I'd lost, but for what I'd found. That evening I called my contractors and made one small change to the rehabilitation center plans. Instead of a formal garden in the front courtyard, I wanted an apple orchard. 6 trees planted in memory of the woman who'd taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. They have to be grown with patience, love, and time. The Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center opened 18 months later to international acclaim. We were featured in Medical Journal Weekly as the future of cardiac care. The apple orchard was in full bloom. But the most meaningful moment came on opening day, when I was giving tours to potential patients and their families. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, asked if she could pick an apple. Of course, I told her. That's what they're there for. As she bit into the apple, her face lit up with joy. It's so sweet. The best things usually are, I said, thinking of my grandmother and her recipe that had traveled so far to find its way home. That night, I stood in my office looking out at the orchard and thought about the woman I'd become. Not the bitter, angry person I could have been, but someone who'd turned pain into purpose, rejection into resilience. I'd proven that a waitress could become a business mogul. I'd shown that hard work and determination could overcome prejudice and privilege. I'd built something that would help heal hearts, literally and figuratively. And in the end, that was worth more than all the revenge in the world. The Davidson name would live on, all right, but it would be associated with healing, not harm, with building people up, not tearing them down. I think my grandmother would have been proud. So after part 1 blew up, holy shit, I wasn't expecting that response. A lot of you asked what happened next. Well, buckle up, because the story doesn't end with me riding off into the sunset. Turns out some people don't handle being shown up very well. The Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center had been open for 6 months when everything went to hell. I was in the middle of the best year of my professional life. Our center was booked solid 3 months out. I'd been invited to speak at medical conferences across the the country. Harvard Medical School had reached out about developing a partnership program. Life was fucking perfect. Then I got a call from my lawyer at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Emma, we have a problem, a big one. I was in my kitchen making coffee, still in my pajamas. What kind of problem? Medical malpractice lawsuit. The plaintiff is claiming gross negligence, wrongful death, and they're seeking $50 million in damages. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Who? We haven't lost a single patient. Our mortality rate is the lowest in the state. The plaintiff is represented by Henderson, Walsh & Associates. Henderson, as in Margaret Henderson, Queen Bee of the Country Club, the same woman who'd told me the Davidson property would be perfect for my medical center. Who's the plaintiff? I asked, though I was already starting to suspect. Patricia Davidson. She's claiming that the stress of losing her family home caused her husband to have a fatal heart attack, and that your actions constituted intentional infliction of emotional distress, resulting in wrongful death. I sat down hard on my kitchen stool. Robert's dead? Died 3 weeks ago. Massive coronary. The family is claiming you deliberately caused psychological trauma that led to his death. This was insane. Yes, I'd bought their house. Yes, I'd been somewhat vindictive about it, but I hadn't killed anyone. There's more, my lawyer continued. They've also filed complaints with the state medical board, claiming you used your medical credentials inappropriately in a business transaction, and they've contacted the local news. Channel 7 is running a story tonight about a revenge-obsessed nurse practitioner who may have caused a man's death. My perfect world started crumbling in real time. By noon, the story was everywhere. The local news had somehow gotten hold of security footage from the Davidson house showing me walking out on Christmas night 10 years ago. They'd interviewed neighbors who described me as vindictive and clearly unstable. They had quotes from medical professionals questioning whether someone with obvious anger management issues should be treating patients. The story they were telling wasn't about a woman who'd overcome adversity to build something meaningful. It was about a psychopath nurse who'd spent 10 years plotting revenge against an innocent family and had literally scared a man to death. By 2 p.m., protesters were outside my medical center. By 4 p.m., I was getting death threats. By 6 p.m., 3 patients had canceled their surgeries. I called an emergency meeting with my business partner, Dr. Harrison, and our entire legal team. This is character assassination, Dr. Harrison said, pacing around our conference room. Robert Davidson had a family history of heart disease. He'd had 2 previous heart attacks. His death had nothing to do with Emma or our business transaction. Doesn't matter, our lead attorney replied. Perception is reality in cases like this. They don't need to prove Emma actually caused his death. They just need to make a jury believe it's possible. So what do? I asked. Fight back, hard. We investigate the Davidson family, find out what they're really up to, because this level of coordinated attack doesn't happen without serious money and connections behind it. What we found over the next week made my blood run cold. The Davidson family wasn't just broke. They were in debt to some very dangerous people. Robert hadn't just lost money in bad investments. He'd been embezzling from his own dealerships for years to feed a gambling addiction. When that wasn't enough, he'd borrowed money from loan sharks, serious ones. After I bought their house, the family had used most of the $7 million to pay off legitimate debts, but they still owed $2 million to people who don't accept payment plans. Marcus had apparently come up with a plan: destroy my reputation and business, force me into a settlement, and use that money to pay off the dangerous debts. The mastermind behind the legal strategy was James's wife, Ashley. Turns out she wasn't just a spoiled rich girl, she was a Harvard-trained lawyer who'd been disbarred 3 years ago for ethics violations. She was using her legal knowledge to orchestrate the attack while staying officially uninvolved. They'd recruited Margaret Henderson by promising her a piece of any settlement. They'd planted stories with sympathetic journalists. They'd even hired a PR firm to manage the media narrative. But the most devastating discovery was that they'd gotten to some of my own staff. My head of nursing, Linda, had been feeding them information about our patients, our procedures, our internal operations. She'd been secretly recording conversations, photographing medical records, and looking for anything that could be used against me. The betrayal hit me harder than anything else. Linda had been with me since we opened. I'd trusted her completely. She'd been in my house, met my family, attended my birthday parties. When I confronted her, she didn't even have the grace to look ashamed. They offered me $200,000, she said flatly. My daughter needs surgery we can't afford. You can replace me, but I can't replace her. I wanted to hate her for it, but I understood. Desperate people do desperate things. The Davidsons were experts at exploiting desperation. By the end of week 2, the situation was critical. We'd lost 30% of our patients. 2 of our partner surgeons had withdrawn from cases. The hospital that supplied our blood products was reviewing their relationship with us. Worst of all, the state medical board had opened a formal investigation into my fitness to practice. Even if we eventually won the lawsuit, the board investigation could take years and cost me my license. I was in my office at 10 p.m. staring at financial projections that showed we'd be out of business within 6 months when my phone rang. Ms. Davidson, this is Detective Maria Santos with the Fraud Division. I need to ask you some questions about the Davidson family and their recent financial activities. Apparently, the FBI had been investigating Robert Davidson's dealerships for money laundering. His death had accelerated their timeline, and they discovered the loan shark connections, the embezzlement, and the coordinated attack on my business. We have evidence that this lawsuit is part of a conspiracy to commit fraud, Detective Santos explained, but we need your cooperation to build a case. The next few weeks were like something out of a movie. I wore a wire to meetings with my own own lawyers, who it turned out had been partially compromised by the Davidsons. I secretly recorded phone calls with former employees who'd been bribed to provide false testimony. The breakthrough came when Marcus, of all people, reached out to me. He called me at 2 a.m., clearly drunk and scared out of his mind. "Emma, you need to run. Get out of the city. They're going to kill you." "Who's going to kill me? Marcus, what are you talking about?" "The people my dad owed money to. Ashley convinced them that destroying your business would get them paid faster than waiting for dad's life insurance. But now the FBI is sniffing around and they think you're cooperating with the cops." "Are you saying loan sharks are threatening to kill me because your family decided to frame me for your father's death?" "I'm saying my family has lost their fucking minds, and now we're all in danger." Ashley's plan was supposed to be simple. Sue you, settle for a few million, everyone walks away happy. But it's all fallen apart. "Where are you?" "Hiding in a motel outside the city." "Emma, I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I never wanted any of this. I tried to talk them out of it, but they said you'd ruined us, and turnabout was fair play." "Marcus, you need to go to the FBI. Tell them everything you know." "I can't. Ashley says if any of us cooperate, we'll all go to prison as co-conspirators. And if you don't cooperate, you might all end up dead." There was a long silence. Will you come with me to the FBI? "I know I have no right to ask, but I'm scared, and you're the strongest person I know." 3 hours later, I was sitting in an FBI field office with Marcus Davidson, watching him confess to conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering charges. The agents were recording everything as Marcus laid out the entire plan. How Ashley had researched my business to find vulnerabilities, how they'd hired private investigators to dig up dirt on my past, how they'd systematically bribed and threatened people into providing false testimony. "The goal was never to win in court," Marcus explained. "Ashley said juries are unpredictable, and court cases take too long. The goal was to destroy Emma's reputation so completely that she'd settle just to make it stop." "And the death threats?" Agent Rodriguez asked. "Those weren't part of our plan, but when the loan sharks heard about the lawsuit, they started pressuring us to move faster. They said if we couldn't pay them back through legal means, they'd collect through other methods." "Meaning?" "Meaning they'd kill Emma and make it look like a suicide. A guilt-ridden medical professional who couldn't live with causing a patient's death." I felt sick. These people, this family that I'd once wanted to be part of, had been planning to have me murdered. The FBI moved fast. Within 48 hours, they'd arrested Ashley, James, and Patricia Davidson on conspiracy charges. They'd also rounded up 6 members of the loan shark operation, including the guy who'd been paid to kill me. Margaret Henderson and 2 other country club members were arrested for their roles in the media manipulation campaign. Linda, my former head nurse, was arrested for HIPAA violations and conspiracy. The medical board dropped their investigation immediately. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The news outlets that had run the hit pieces were forced to issue retractions and public apologies. But the damage was already done. Even after the truth came out, even after the Davidsons were exposed as criminals, the stain on my reputation lingered. Some people believed the conspiracy was just a cover-up. Others figured where there's smoke, there must be fire. I'd saved my business, but I'd lost something else, my peace of mind. For months afterward, I couldn't sleep without checking the locks 3 times. I hired a security firm to watch my apartment. I couldn't eat in restaurants without wondering if someone had poisoned my food. The woman who'd built a medical empire was afraid to leave her house. Dr. Harrison suggested I take a sabbatical, maybe go somewhere far away and let things cool down. But that felt like letting them win. I'd worked too hard and come too far to run away now. Instead, I decided to do something different, something that would honor my grandmother's memory and everything she'd taught me about turning pain into purpose. I announced that I was establishing the Davidson Foundation for Medical Justice, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping healthcare workers who'd been falsely accused of malpractice or misconduct. The foundation would provide legal assistance, financial support, and emotional counseling for medical professionals whose careers had been destroyed by frivolous lawsuits or coordinated attacks. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that I was using the Davidson name, the name I'd legally adopted, to help heal the damage that the original Davidson family had tried to inflict. Our first case was a pediatric nurse in Texas who'd been accused of causing a child's death when she'd actually saved the kid's life. A wealthy family had sued her because they were embarrassed about their own neglect, and they had enough money to buy expert witnesses and manipulate the media. Sound familiar? Within 6 months, we'd helped 12 medical professionals clear their names and rebuild their careers. Within a year, we were operating in 6 states and had prevented 4 healthcare workers from committing suicide. The foundation became bigger than my medical practice. We were featured in the New England Journal of Medicine as an example of how the medical community could protect itself from legal predators. But the most meaningful moment came 2 years after the whole nightmare began. I was giving a speech at a medical conference about overcoming adversity when a young woman approached me afterward. "Ms. Davidson, I'm Sarah Martinez. I was one of the nurses you helped through the foundation, the family that accused me of killing their premature baby." I remembered her case, a tragic situation where the baby had been born with fatal genetic defects, but the parents had blamed the NICU staff rather than face the reality of their child's condition. "How are you doing, Sarah?" "I'm good. I'm back at work, my license was fully restored, and I'm getting married next month." She smiled through tears. "But that's not why I wanted to talk to you." "What is it?" "I wanted you to know that what you went through, what you survived, it gave me hope when I thought there was none. When I was sitting in my car with a bottle of Hills, ready to end it all, I thought about your story, about how you didn't let them destroy you." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, wrapped package. "I know this might sound crazy, but I learned to bake during my suspension. It helped with the stress. And I made this for you. Inside the package was a miniature apple pie, perfectly golden and still warm. I looked up your grandmother's recipe online, the one from Food and Wine magazine. I hope I did it justice. I took a bite of that tiny pie, and for a moment, I was back in my grandmother's kitchen, learning that the most important ingredient in any recipe is love. It's perfect, I told her, and I meant it. That night in my hotel room, I called Marcus. He'd served 18 months in federal prison and was now working at a nonprofit that helped former addicts find employment. His voice was different, clearer, more honest than I'd ever heard it. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Better. Clean for 2 years now. Turns out prison was exactly what I needed to get my head straight." He paused. "Emma, I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. Not just for the lawsuit and the conspiracy, for everything. For that night at Christmas dinner, for being too weak to stand up for you, for all of it. I know. Do you ever think about forgiveness? Real forgiveness, not just the kind you give to make yourself feel better?" I thought about Sarah Martinez and her apple pie. I thought about all the medical professionals we'd helped through the foundation. I thought about my grandmother and her belief that healing was always possible if you had enough patience and love. "I think forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened," I said. "It's about choosing not to let it define what happens next." "Does that mean you forgive me?" "It means I hope you find peace, Marcus, and I hope you use whatever time you have left to build something good." 6 months later, Marcus sent me a newspaper clipping. He'd started a foundation that provided financial literacy education to people struggling with gambling addiction. The program was called Second Chances and was already helping hundreds of families avoid the mistakes his father had made. At the bottom of the clipping, he'd written a note, "Building something good. Thank you for showing me what that looks like." Today, 5 years after the whole nightmare, I'm sitting in my office looking out at the apple orchard. The trees are heavy with fruit, and patients' families often sit under them during difficult waiting periods. The Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center is now the flagship location of a network of 12 facilities across the East Coast. The Davidson Foundation for Medical Justice has helped over 500 healthcare workers and has been copied by similar organizations in 8 countries. My personal life has stabilized too. I'm engaged to Dr. Michael Chen, a cardiac surgeon who joined our practice 3 years ago. He knows my whole story and loves me anyway, maybe even because of it. We're planning a simple wedding ceremony in the apple orchard, with apple pie for dessert instead of traditional wedding cake. Yesterday, I got a letter from Patricia Davidson. She'd been released from federal prison after serving 2 years and wanted to make amends. In the letter, she wrote, "I spent my entire life believing that money and status were the only things that mattered. I raised my children to believe that people like you were beneath us. I was wrong about everything. You've built something beautiful and meaningful, and you've done it with grace and integrity. I hope someday I can find a way to contribute something positive to the world, the way you have." I haven't decided whether to respond to her letter yet. Part of me wants to help her find that path to redemption. Part of me thinks she needs to find it on her own. But I've learned that healing is a process, not an event. And sometimes the people who hurt us the most can become the catalyst for us becoming our best selves. The little girl who bit into that first apple from our orchard was right. The best things really are sweet. But what she didn't know is that sweetness often comes after the most bitter experiences. My grandmother used to say that the best apples grow on trees that have survived the worst storms. I think she was talking about more than fruit. The Davidson name will live on, associated with healing and justice and second chances. That feels like the best possible ending to this story. Well, almost the best possible ending. Last week, James Davidson was released from prison. He served 3 years for his role in the conspiracy and has been working as a paralegal for a legal aid clinic that helps low-income families. He called me yesterday. "Emma, I know I have no right to ask you this, but I need help. Not money. I'd never ask you for money, but advice." "What kind of advice?" "My daughter, Sophie, you remember her? The one who brought you the pie recipe? She wants to be a doctor. She's brilliant, gets straight A's, volunteers at a free clinic, but she's having trouble getting into medical school because of our family's criminal history. The sins of the fathers," I murmured. "Yeah, and I know you have connections, influence. I'm not asking you to pull strings or do anything unethical, but maybe you could just meet with her, let her tell you about her dreams. She says you've been her inspiration since she was little." I thought about that scared 6-year-old who'd wanted to try my pie while the adults argued around her. I thought about how trauma and dysfunction can echo through generations, but so can healing and hope. "Have her call my office and set up an appointment," I said. "Really? Emma, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'll meet with her, but I won't make any promises beyond that. That's more than we deserve." Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. But I've learned that the question isn't what people deserve. It's who we choose to be in response to them. Sophie Davidson is coming to see me next week. She wants to specialize in cardiac surgery, just like her role model. She's written her medical school application essay about how watching someone transform pain into purpose inspired her to pursue medicine. I think my grandmother would love the irony. A Davidson teaching another Davidson that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. The story never really ends, does it? It just keeps growing, like apple trees planted by someone who believed in the power of sweet things to heal bitter wounds. But if this is where we close this chapter, I'm okay with that. I've built something meaningful. I've helped people heal. I've turned my name into something that stands for justice and second chances. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun is setting behind the apple orchard, I can almost hear my grandmother's voice whispering in the wind, "Well done, sweetheart. Well done." Okay, this is it. The final update. After this blew up even bigger than than I expected. I've gotten thousands of messages asking me to finish the story. What happened with Sophie? Did I help her get into medical school? Is there more to the Davidson family secrets? The answer to all of those questions is yes, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. Sophie Davidson walked into my office on a Tuesday morning in October, and I barely recognized her. The scared little girl who'd wanted to try my pie had grown into a poised, confident young woman. She was 21 now, a senior at Columbia studying biochemistry with a 4.0 GPA. But what struck me most was how she carried herself. There was something familiar about her posture, her mannerisms, the way she tilted her head when she was thinking. It reminded me of someone, though I couldn't place who. "Ms. Davidson," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "thank you so much for agreeing to see me. I know my family has put you through hell, and you have every right to want nothing to do with any of us. Sit down, Sophie. Tell me about your goals." For the next hour, she talked about her passion for cardiac surgery, her volunteer work at free clinics, her research on innovative surgical techniques. She was brilliant, articulate, and genuinely committed to helping people. Everything you'd want in a future doctor. But she was also a Davidson, and medical school admissions committees were rejecting her applications based on her family's criminal history. "I've applied to 15 schools," she said, pulling out a folder of rejection letters. 12 outright rejections, 3 waitlists. My MCAT scores are in the 99th percentile, my GPA is perfect, my recommendations are stellar. But every interview ends the same way. "We're concerned about your family background and whether you share their ethical flexibility." That's not fair to you. No, it's not. But I understand why they're cautious. My family tried to destroy an innocent person's career and life. They conspired with criminals. They put patients at risk by bribing medical staff. From the outside, it looks like corruption runs in the Davidson blood. Does it? She looked me straight in the eye. No, it doesn't. But I can't prove that with words. I can only prove it with actions, and I need someone to give me that chance. I studied her face, still trying to figure out why she looked so familiar. "Sophie, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Who do you look like? In your family, I mean. You don't really resemble James or Ashley." She shifted uncomfortably. That's actually something I wanted to talk to you about. Something I found out recently that changes everything." She reached into her purse and pulled out an old photograph, black and white, slightly faded, showing a young woman in a nurse's uniform standing in front of a hospital. This was in my grandfather Robert's personal effects, the effects the family didn't want anyone to see. I took the photograph and felt my blood turn to ice. The woman in the picture could have been my twin. Same eyes, same nose, same smile. Even the same way of standing with one hip cocked slightly to the side. "Who is this?" I whispered. "Her name was Elena Davidson. She was my great-grandmother, Robert's mother. She died when he was 12. I stared at the photograph, my mind racing. Davidson was her married name? No, that's the thing. Davidson was her maiden name. She married a man named Thomas Hartwell. Robert took his father's name when he was adopted by his stepfather. But legally, the Davidson name belonged to Elena's family line. The room started spinning. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're not the only person who chose the Davidson name, Emma. You're not a fake Davidson. You're a real one." She pulled out another document, a genealogy report she'd had professionally done. "Elena Davidson had a brother named William. William had a daughter named Margaret. Margaret had a daughter named Ruth. Ruth had a daughter named Sarah." I finished. "My grandmother's name was Sarah Davidson. Your great-great-grandmother and my great-great-grandmother were sisters. We're family, Emma. Distant cousins, but family." I set the photograph down with shaking hands. "You're telling me that when I changed my name to Davidson, I was actually reclaiming my own family name? It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it. My dad and his siblings grew up hearing stories about the other Davidsons, the poor branch of the family that had scattered across the country. Robert used to make jokes about them, call them the unsuccessful Davidsons who couldn't make anything of themselves. He was talking about my family. He was talking about your family. And when you showed up in Marcus's life, when they heard your grandmother's maiden name was Davidson, they figured it out. That's part of why they treated you so horribly that Christmas. It wasn't just classism. It was family rivalry going back generations." I thought back to that terrible dinner, to Patricia's comments about family standards and knowing one's place. They hadn't just been rejecting me as a girlfriend. They'd been rejecting me as a Davidson. Does Marcus know this? He figured it out during the FBI investigation. Dad told him everything when they were trying to sort out the family's legal problems. Marcus wanted to tell you, but he was afraid you'd think he was making it up to manipulate you. Why are you telling me now? Sophie leaned forward. "Because I need you to understand something. The Davidson name isn't theirs to control or yours to reclaim. It belongs to both of us. It belongs to Elena's memory and the legacy she should have left." She pulled out one more document from her folder. "This is Elena's nursing school transcript from 1923. She graduated valedictorian from the same program that eventually became part of Columbia's nursing school. She specialized in cardiac care, the primitive cardiac care they could do back then. She spent her career working in charity hospitals, treating patients who couldn't afford private doctors." I looked at Elena's transcript, at her grades, at the notation that she'd received the award for exceptional dedication to patient care and medical innovation. She sounds like an incredible woman. She was, and she was also the original apple pie baker in the family. My head snapped up. "What?" Sophie smiled for the first time since she'd walked into my office. "The recipe you thought was your grandmother's family recipe? It was Elena's. She taught it to her brother William, who taught it to his daughter Margaret, who taught it to her daughter Ruth, who taught it to your grandmother Sarah. You're saying my grandmother's famous apple pie recipe originally came from your great-grandmother? great-grandmother? I'm saying it came from our great-great-grandmother. Elena Davidson created that recipe in 1925. She was known throughout the hospital where she worked for bringing apple pies to comfort families of Haitians who didn't make it. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. Everything I thought I knew about my family, my name, my identity was shifting. Sophie, why are you telling me all this? What do you want? I want to make you an offer, not for money or favors or special treatment. I want to propose a partnership. What kind of partnership? I want to work for you, not as a doctor. I know I have to earn that on my own, but I want to work for the Davidson Foundation while I reapply to medical school. I want to help other people who've been unfairly judged because of their family history. She pulled out a thick folder. I've been researching cases of medical professionals who've been discriminated against because of their backgrounds, children of criminals who can't get into medical school, immigrants whose foreign credentials aren't recognized, people from poor families who are assumed to be less capable. You want to expand the foundation's mission. I want to help you build something that would make Elena Davidson proud, something that honors the legacy she should have left, using medical knowledge to help people regardless of their background or ability to pay. I looked at this young woman who shared my genes, my passion for healing, and apparently my grandmother's apple pie recipe, and I made a decision that surprised even me. Sophie, I'll make you a deal. Work for the foundation for 2 years. Help me build the programs you're describing. Learn the business side of healthcare and social justice. And after 2 years, I'll personally recommend you to the Dean of Columbia Medical School. Really? Really? But there's one condition. Anything. We do this as equal partners. Not as me helping you, but as two Davidsons working together to build something meaningful. And we start by legally establishing that the Davidson name belongs to Elena's legacy, not to any one branch of the family. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. You'd do that? You'd share the name you've worked so hard to make respectable? Sophie, I didn't make the Davidson name respectable. I just reminded people what it was supposed to represent in the first place. That night, I called Marcus and told him everything. So you're telling me that Emma Davidson was always supposed to be your name? He said. That's either cosmic justice or the universe's idea of a really complicated joke. I think it's both. I'm glad Sophie told you. I've been carrying that secret for 2 years, and it was eating me alive. Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Okay. That night at Christmas dinner, did your family know? Did they recognize my name? There was a long pause. My mom knew. She'd heard family stories about the other Davidsons. When you said your grandmother's name was Sarah Davidson, she put it together immediately. And she didn't say anything. She was ashamed. Our branch of the family had gotten rich while yours had struggled. She felt guilty about it, so she overcompensated by being cruel. She convinced herself that if you were successful, it diminished our success. That's fucked up logic. Yeah, it is. But Emma, I need you to know something else. That last conversation I had with you before the FBI thing, when I told you about my father's gambling debts, yeah? I lied about something. Well, not lied exactly, but left something out. My stomach dropped. What? My father's gambling addiction started after he found out about your success. When he learned that a Davidson was building a medical empire while his dealerships were failing, he lost it. He started gambling more and more, trying to win back enough money to compete with you. You're saying my success drove your father to destroy himself? I'm saying my father's pride and competitiveness drove him to destroy himself. Your success just revealed what was already broken in him. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about family legacies and the strange ways trauma and triumph get passed down through generations. 6 months later, Sophie and I officially launched the Elena Davidson Initiative, a program that provides scholarships, mentoring, and legal support for aspiring medical professionals from disadvantaged backgrounds. Our first scholarship recipient was Sarah Martinez, the nurse whose case had inspired the original foundation. She was starting medical school in the fall. Our second scholarship went to Marcus Davidson. Yes, Marcus. At 35, he decided to pursue nursing school. He wanted to work in addiction counseling, helping people who were struggling with the same demons that had destroyed his father. I know it's weird, he said when he called to tell me about his acceptance. Me becoming a nurse while you're running a medical empire. It's not weird, it's perfect. Elena would have loved it. A year later, Sophie was accepted to Columbia Medical School with a full scholarship. The dean personally called to tell her that her work with the foundation had demonstrated exactly the kind of character they wanted in their students. On her first day of medical school, she called me from the same hospital where Elena had worked nearly a century ago. Emma, I'm standing in the lobby where our great-great-grandmother used to comfort grieving families with apple pie. There's a plaque here I've never noticed before. What does it say? In memory of Elena Davidson, RN, 1900-1932. She healed with her hands and comforted with her heart. Her legacy lives on in every life she touched. She has a memorial plaque? She has more than that. There's a whole display case with photos and documents about her work. Emma, she didn't just bake apple pies for families. She pioneered patient advocacy programs. She created support groups for families of cardiac patients. She established a fund to help poor families pay for medical care. I felt tears streaming down my face. She did all that in 1920s? She did all that in the 1920s, when women weren't supposed to do anything except follow orders. Emma, we didn't just inherit her name or her pie recipe. We inherited her calling. That evening, I drove out to the Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center and walked through the apple orchard. The trees were heavy with fruit, and families were scattered throughout the grove, some celebrating successful surgeries, others finding comfort in nature while they waited for news. I thought about Elena Davidson, working in a charity hospital 90 years ago, probably never imagining that her great-great-granddaughter would build a medical empire that bore her name. I thought about my grandmother Sarah, keeping Elena's recipes and stories alive even when she didn't know their full significance. And I thought about the strange journey that had brought me from a humiliated waitress to a medical mogul to a woman who'd discovered she was exactly who she was supposed to be all along. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Chen, my fiancé. "How's the orchard looking? Ready for tomorrow?" Tomorrow was our wedding day. We were getting married under the apple trees with apple pie for dessert, surrounded by people who'd become family through choice rather than blood. Marcus would be there, clean and sober and starting his second year of nursing school. Sophie would be there, halfway through medical school and already talking about specializing in cardiac surgery. Dr. Harrison would be there, proud of the empire we'd built together. Even James and Patricia would be there. They'd both served their time, done their community service, and were slowly rebuilding their lives. We weren't close, probably never would be, but we'd found a way to coexist as distant family members who respected each other's efforts to be better. The only person who wouldn't be there was Ashley, who was still serving time for masterminding the conspiracy. She'd sent a letter apologizing and asking for forgiveness, but some bridges are too burned to rebuild. As the sun set behind the apple trees, I picked a piece of fruit and took a bite. It was perfect, sweet and tart and complex, just like the life I'd built from the ashes of that terrible Christmas dinner. My phone rang. The caller ID said unknown number, but something told me to answer. "Is this Emma Davidson?" "Yes, who's this?" "My name is Dr. Patricia Williams. I'm calling from Johns Hopkins. I'm head of cardiac surgery here, and I have an unusual request." "I'm listening." "We're establishing a new program for innovative cardiac procedures, and we want to name it after a pioneering nurse who worked in cardiac care in the 1920s, Elena Davidson. My research suggests you might be related to her." I smiled, looking up at the apple trees that Elena's legacy had helped plant. "Dr. Williams, I think we have a lot to talk about." As I walked back toward the medical center, past the sign that read Davidson Cardiac Rehabilitation Center, I realized that some stories don't end. They just keep growing, like apple trees planted by someone who believed in the power of healing. The Davidson name would live on, all right, but it would represent what it was always supposed to represent: healing, innovation, and the belief that everyone deserves a second chance at life. And tomorrow, when I married Dr. Chen under Elena's apple trees, I'd be surrounded by the family I'd chosen and the family I'd discovered, all of us bearing witness to the truth that love really can triumph over hate, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. The last thing I did before leaving the orchard was pick a perfect apple and put it in my pocket. Tomorrow, I'd give it to the youngest person at the wedding, probably one of Sophie's cousins, and tell them Elena's story, because that's how legacies really work. Not through money or property or business empires, but through stories passed down and values lived out and apple pie recipes that carry the love of someone who's been gone for 90 years, but whose influence is still growing. The Davidson name is safe now. All of it. The good parts and the lessons learned from the bad parts. Elena would be proud. And my grandmother? I think she's been laughing about this whole thing from whatever comes after. She always said the best recipes have secret ingredients you don't discover until you're ready for them. Turns out the secret ingredient in her apple pie wasn't just love. It was coming home. The end.